Hey everyone, this is Finn, and in this video I am going to be showing you the first of the few tutorials that I'm going to give you this week, helping you set up and creating your 2D platformer game. In this first video, we are going to learn about setting up our environment and our character. Let's go ahead and create a new 2D project by clicking this blue New button up at the top right, selecting a 2D template, and then I'm going to rename my project 2D Platformer. Then I'll press Create. When your scene loads, go ahead and right-click in your project window, create a new folder, and then name that new folder Sprite Sheets. Then I'm going to double-click to open that Sprite Sheets folder, and in this space, right-click, import new asset, and then your Internet Explorer, or then your File Explorer will come up and you have the option to choose your sprite sheet. Grab your idle sprite sheet, and now that's imported into my project files. Go over to the inspector, make sure that your texture type right here says sprite. If it doesn't, click the drop-down menu and select sprite. Sprite mode, change from single to multiple because we have a sprite sheet with multiple sprites packed inside of it and we want to cut them. To do that, go down to the bottom right and click Apply, and then open up your sprite editor by clicking the sprite editor button right here. Now we need to cut our sprite sheet. Go up to the top left and open up the Slice drop-down menu. Let's keep the type as automatic, but change the pivot point to bottom. And now let's click Slice. If you hold Control, you can see the green outline of your sprite sheet. You can see the green outline of where each sprite is cut out. Click the top right Apply button. And now let's exit out of Sprite Editor. Before we add our character, we're going to want to at least create a starting platform. To do that, in my hierarchy, I'm going to right-click and create a 3D object. I'm going to add a cube. Now I am going to move my cube down and towards the bottom left. And then I'm going to click on the Rect tool up here in my Transform Tools menu. And then I'm going to click and drag my platform like this. It's going to be about 6 on the x-axis for scale. And then I have my position about -5 on the x-axis and -4 on the y-axis. Let's get rid of our box collider because we need a box collider 2D since we are working in a 2D view. Let's click the top right with the 3 dots and remove component, and then click Add Component and select Box Collider 2D. Let's rename that cube Floor, and I am going to give it a material. I'm going to go out into my Assets root folder and create another folder. Right-click, Create, Folder, and I'm going to name that Materials. Double-click on that to open it, and then I'm going to right-click, create material, and I'm going to name that platforms. Then I'm going to click and drag that to my floor game object. I'm going to change the albedo property from white to green. Now I'm going to toggle off the 2D view, and then I'm going to create a light by right-clicking and creating a light object, directional object. Directional light. Once you have a directional light, you can position that where you feel it is good. There we go, and now as you can see, it lights up our floor much better. I'm going to toggle the 2D view back on. And then I'm going to adjust my color now that I know what the lighting is going to look like. Go back to the platforms material, and let's change the albedo to something a little less saturated. Alright, there we go. I'm going to drag the directional light game object to be underneath the main camera. That doesn't do anything. That is just how I'm used to looking at my hierarchy, so you can make adjustments like that based on your own preference. Make sure that you save your scene. And now I am going to go back to my sprite sheets folder. I'm going to open up my idle sprite sheet. And now I'm going to click and drag my first frame of my idle sprite sheet out onto the hierarchy. I'm going to adjust myself into place, but as you can see, my character is way bigger than I've anticipated, so I'm going to scale the game object down by half. Let's go to scale, and I'm going to make the X and Y coordinates 0.5. There we go. That's much better. Now I am going to rename the game object from idle sprite sheet _0 to player, and that is going to be our player game object. Right now, our player game object has a transform component, as all game objects do, and a sprite renderer. Right now, the sprite that we're on is the first frame of our idle sprite sheet. It is our neutral pose. And we have no animations. I'm going to click Add Component, and I'm going to add a Box Collider 2D to my character. I'm also going to add a Rigid Body 2D, so that I can land on my platform. Make sure that gravity scale is set to 1. I'm going to save my scene by pressing Ctrl S, and now I'm going to press play. Our character lands on the platform. If I drag my character up manually in the scene view and drop him, we can see gravity affects our character. Now, let's set up our idle animation. Select our player game object and go to your animation window. Let's press Create to create an animator and an animation clip. And then I'm going to go from the Sprite Sheets folder back to the Assets folder, right-click, and create a new folder for our animations called Animations. I'm going to double-click on that to open, and then name our new animation Idle, and press Save. Now go to Add Property, Sprite Renderer, and then go all the way down to the Sprite property and press the plus button. Now go over to this last frame, select it, and press delete. Then that'll bring up this menu, and you want to press the delete key. Now, let's press the record button and move to the 5th frame. Let's go over here to the red highlighted sprite property. Click on this circle icon with a dot inside, and then select the 2nd frame. Now go to frame 10, select the same icon, and select the last frame, the 3rd. Now we can go to frame 15, select that icon, and go back a frame because we are starting to make our way back to the 1st frame for a completed loop. And we will have 5 frames in total. I'm going to press play and you can see it loop. Right now it's pretty fast. We can change how fast that animation plays in 2 ways. But first, I want to address this problem here. If you look at the feet, they do not stay in one place. We want our body to crunch forward, but we want our feet to stay in one place. In order to fix this, we're going to go back to our sprite sheet and go back to our sprite editor by clicking this button here. We have the pivot point at the bottom center of each one of these frames. I am going to put it somewhere on each of these, each 3 of these frames. I'm going to move the pivot point to somewhere that they all have in common, which is the foot on the left side here, this ankle. That always stays in the same position, so we're going to use that as our pivot point. Notice how that changes our pivot point to custom. I'm going to click on the 2nd sprite, and I'm going to click and drag to that ankle again. Then I'm going to press apply and exit out of sprite editor. And we'll see that that fixes our animation, but our box collider is a little bit out of the way now. So I am going to remove our box collider 2D and add it on again. Remove component. And then by adding that box collider, it's going to reset its position. And I'll move our player game object up a little bit as well. There are 2 ways that we can change an animation's speed. We can either change the speed directly in the animator by clicking on the animation and changing this speed option right here from 1 to something else. If you want it to be faster, you can change it to something more than 1. If you want it slower, change it to a number less than 1. Or we can box select these frames here so that we're selecting all the frames on our timeline, and then we can click and drag this corner blue bar out to where we want it. I want to drag it so that the entire animation is about 1 minute and 20 seconds. Excuse me, so that it's 1 second and 20 milliseconds. This is going to be 80 frames. I'll press play. And that's perfect. Now I'm going to make sure I save my scene by pressing Control S. And then let's click the Animator tab up here. If you don't have the Animator tab, make sure you click the Window tab up here, go to Animation, and then select Animator. And we can see that our idle animation is the default animation. If I press play on our scene, we can test our animation and watch our character go directly into the idle animation. Let's press play. Very good. If I wanted to click and move the player, we're still playing the animation. I am doing that in the scene view, by the way. There is no movement to our character yet. I am just in my scene window, clicking and dragging to demonstrate that if the character is higher up, we fall, and we are playing our idle animation. Let's add a couple more platforms for now. I'm going to select my floor game object and press Control D. That's going to duplicate that platform. Floor. I'm going to rename it Floor 2. And then I'm going to drag it here. This will be our first challenge when we actually start creating the movement for our character. Our player will want to jump from the first platform to the second. To organize my platforms, I'm going to right-click on the hierarchy and create an empty game object. I'm going to name that game object Platforms. Then I am going to select Floor, hold Control on my keyboard, and then select Floor 2, and click and drag those both into the Platforms empty game object. Now you have a couple of starting platforms, a player, and your idle animation is set up. I hope this helped, and I hope you have a wonderful day.